well, I think that we can start. In this final part of the afternoon, we have the opportunity to get a short overview of national regulatory system of local services in 5 countries. And also, I hope some institutional hints and or some suggestion for the future teaching module, and in particular from Italy, Alessandro Gargani, that is the Deputy Director of ANCI, the Italian Association of Municipalities. From Portugal, Catarina Rosetta Palma of the Istituto Universitario di Lisbona. From France, Jihad El Nabulsi, Université France Comte. From Algeria, Malika Chertouk, Université de Tizi Ouzou. And from United Kingdom, Peter Nord of the Greater London Authority. Alessandro Gargani will speak on behalf of the director of the... I'm sorry. Di Bari will speak on behalf of Alessandro Gargani, that is the director of the Italian Association. Sorry for the mistake. So, please, Di Bari.
Ok, buon pomeriggio a tutti. Riporto i saluti dell'Associazione Nazionale dei Comuni Italiani, che rappresenta circa 7.000 comuni rispetto agli 8.000 comuni che rappresentano la municipalità del nostro territorio. Purtroppo il vice segretario generale non è potuto intervenire per impegni sopravvenuti e ci teneva comunque a che l'ANCI fosse presente qui. Io sono Antonio Di Bari e sono stato già introdotto. Ringraziamo dell'invito per questa importante occasione che dagli interventi precedenti non trova una risposta definitiva ed uniforme né a livello di singola nazione né a livello europeo. E infatti, entrando nel merito, dagli altri interventi che mi hanno preceduto, è apparso evidente che ci vuole una necessità di confronto, ci vuole una necessità di dialogo istituzionale affinché si giunga a una regolazione che, diciamo, privilegia un approccio bottom-up, quindi dal basso verso l'alto, che inverte la tendenza rispetto all'approccio top-down che molti stati seguono nell'imporre determinate politiche di regolazione dei singoli settori e dei servizi pubblici locali in particolare. Quindi, diciamo, il primo stadio a livello italiano è quello di una necessità di una razionalizzazione delle diverse regolazioni, dei diversi compiti degli enti previsti dalla nostra Costituzione. Perché, per esempio, noi abbiamo 3 livelli: Stato, Regioni ed enti locali, quindi comuni e province. E nei servizi pubblici locali sono competenti tutti e 3, perché lo Stato è competente per quanto riguarda la regolazione della concorrenza. Le regioni hanno parte della materia e quindi hanno la sanità, hanno il trasporto pubblico locale e poi regolano le aggregazioni territoriali, e gli enti locali sono quelli più vicini ai cittadini che fanno la vera regolazione e in moltissimi casi hanno dovuto fare anche la gestione per obblighi di legge o per effettivamente erogare il servizio. Sono quelli che poi devono affidare il servizio e regolarne i vari aspetti. Quindi, come vedete, diciamo, sembrerebbe abbastanza sequenziale il rapporto, però non è così, perché alcuni di voi che hanno visto i notiziari sanno che si sta approvando la manovra nella quale si parla di abrogazione delle province, quindi già verrebbe a mancare un pezzo di questo assetto istituzionale. Nella manovra ci sono norme sui servizi pubblici locali che contengono paletti e vincoli per le stesse amministrazioni, e poi vedremo per sommi capi che cosa significa questo per noi comuni. E per quanto riguarda poi la materia, quindi la normativa, basti sapere, per chi non è addetto al settore, che dall'inizio dell'anno ad oggi abbiamo avuto 3 diverse normative di riferimento nazionali per i servizi pubblici locali. Perché c'è stato l'articolo 23 bis del decreto Ronchi, che ha dato determinate imposizioni. Poi a giugno di quest'anno, quindi molto recente, c'è stato il referendum abrogativo e quindi ha abrogato questo articolo, e nel nostro ordinamento a questo punto, non essendoci una normativa nazionale di riferimento, si faceva capo alle norme comunitarie, quindi con gli affidamenti comunitari, quindi normativa che regolava l'in-house providing secondo le condizioni comunitarie, le PPP, di cui hanno parlato anche i precedenti relatori, e poi la possibilità chiaramente ed ovviamente di ricorso al mercato con la gara per affidamento del servizio ai privati, vedremo a chi. E poi improvvisamente a Ferragosto necessità di manovra finanziaria, economica, di rivedere i compiti, tagli, eccetera, reintroduzione della normativa per i servizi pubblici locali di rilevanza economica, tranne che per l'idrico, perché diciamo, il referendum era stato presentato come un referendum sulla privatizzazione dell'acqua, e quindi il servizio idrico era pericoloso reinserirlo qui e l'hanno tenuto fuori. In realtà diciamo, il disegno inserito, cioè la regolamentazione inserita nella manovra è abbastanza pericolosa, perché il primo aspetto che colpisce è il fatto che presenta profili di incostituzionalità, perché va a regolare una materia che la gente ha detto non deve essere regolata, ma per la quale si devono applicare le normative comunitarie. Quindi già questo fa capire come sia chiara ed uniforme la regolazione italiana in materia di servizi pubblici locali, e quindi i compiti dell'ente che deve affidare questi servizi, diciamo, sono molto agevolati. Tant'è vero che noi non sappiamo al momento come ci dobbiamo comportare. Entrando nel merito della norma, vediamo cosa prevede l'articolo 4 per i comuni. Allora, abbiamo detto prima che ci sono dei settori esclusi, anche prima lo erano perché erano un po' più avanti rispetto alla normativa generale che si vuole dare, e sono la distribuzione del gas, che è l'unico settore che poi è dell'energia elettrica, che ha un'autorità indipendente che fissa le tariffe e regola quelli che sono i rapporti tra aziende, utenti, anche per quanto attiene le tariffe. Poi il servizio idrico integrato, che abbiamo detto, causa referendum, è stato tenuto fuori e quindi segue le normative comunitarie. Però anche per quest'ultimo servizio si è andato a toccare la tariffa, che era regolata da un'altra normativa, abrogando la remunerazione del capitale investito. Quindi per gli investimenti sembra che non ci dovrebbe essere un riconoscimento in tariffa. Questo è un problema, perché poi c'è la direttiva comunitaria che invece dice che ci deve essere copertura dei costi integrali. E poi sono fatti salvi anche le farmacie, che hanno una normativa a sé, e il trasporto ferroviario regionale. Quindi di nuovo vedete competenza nazionale, competenza regionale in materia. Perché noi abbiamo avversato, insomma, questo disegno del legislatore? Perché, come avevamo detto prima, profilo di incostituzionalità, ma soprattutto perché prevede ulteriori vincoli per i comuni, non è stato fatto in maniera chiara ed uniforme, e ci impone l'obbligo di vendere le nostre aziende e di scendere sotto determinate percentuali. Adesso basterebbe soltanto questo punto per capire che diciamo anche chi al primo anno di economia sa che vendere adesso le aziende vuol dire perdere larga parte del capitale investito nelle aziende, perché soprattutto per le quotate il periodo peggiore non si potrebbe trovare. Insomma, difficilmente uno prende il prezzo azionario che aveva prima della crisi. Insomma, quindi se mi si impone di vendere il mio asset entro una certa data, è chiaro che l'investitore, chi deve comprare, aspetterà il momento diciamo peggiore del mercato per comprare a un prezzo più basso, è una logica di mercato, insomma, senza andare troppo nel merito. Poi si prevede un'analisi di mercato che il comune deve fare prima di affidare il servizio. Analisi di mercato che, insomma, come diceva prima l'intervento bancario, chiamiamolo così, per la quale il comune dovrebbe avere tutte le competenze per farlo. Allora, ci sono municipi che ce li hanno, ci sono municipi che si devono dotare di tutto il sistema che, diciamo, era previsto dall'intervento del relatore precedente, ma ci sono comuni che per dimensioni non ce l'hanno, quindi si devono associare oppure devono fare un'analisi di mercato affidandosi ad esterni, ma ci sono vincoli di spesa e quindi non possono affidare a nessuno un'analisi di mercato, quindi non potrebbero farlo. Sarebbe stato meglio forse prevedere un paio d'anni per studiare il settore, vederne l'evoluzione nell'ambito degli affidamenti che la singola amministrazione aveva e capire come fare in maniera unitaria e concertata delle schede tipo che ogni amministrazione doveva compilare per studiare il fenomeno e poi vedere come fare a liberalizzare il settore, ma liberalizzare così, stante quello che abbiamo detto prima, con una regolazione che va studiata e verificata, vuol dire che saranno soltanto presi quei settori, quei segmenti di mercato che sono più appetibili e gli altri saranno lasciati in mano al comune, all'amministrazione che dovrà comunque sia erogare i servizi. Perché è vero che non è un servizio fondamentale quello dell'asilo nido, per esempio, però se un comune ce l'ha e poi non lo eroga più, quella è una mancanza per il cittadino. E se non ci sono privati che vogliono farlo, l'amministrazione si assume la responsabilità di interromperlo, oppure si assume l'onere di lasciarlo a parità di condizioni, anche se in realtà andrebbe migliorato. Quindi ci sono tutti questi presupposti. Dall'altro lato si incentiva con una serie di strumenti a vendere le aziende dicendo che ci sarebbe un fondo che andrebbe a finanziare gli investimenti in servizi pubblici locali. Diciamo che così come è scritta lascia un po' il tempo che trova, perché ormai non crediamo più a quello che vediamo scritto, ma se non c'è una prima attuazione diventa molto difficile. L'altro aspetto è che tutto quello che stiamo dicendo adesso influenza la bancabilità dei progetti. Perché? È chiaro che se non c'è una regolamentazione e una normativa di riferimento chiara, il soggetto che potrebbe essere privatizzato, potrebbe essere in house se è sotto un determinato vincolo economico. La normativa prevede sotto i 900.000 euro annui si può procedere all'affidamento in house, quindi una restrizione rispetto alla normativa comunitaria. Dicevo, se un soggetto si viene a trovare in condizioni che mutano nel tempo, senza una normativa chiara di riferimento, è ovvio che la banca dice: non sai per quanto tempo hai la concessione, non sai come fare a programmare i tuoi investimenti, non sai come farai a ritornare del prestito e quindi io non ti finanzio più. Detta molto semplicemente. Quindi si ripercuote anche sulle aziende, sui lavoratori, sull'indotto. Quindi non si parla soltanto, e questo è l'altro punto, di modalità di affidamento dei servizi pubblici locali, che è un concetto che il legislatore ha estremizzato, perché va puntualmente a definire come, in che modo, in quali modalità, cosa devono contenere, diciamo, come si deve fare la società mista, deve avere il 40%, gara a doppio oggetto. Sì, va bene, ma questo ce l'aveva detto già la Comunità Europea. Una serie di norme c'erano pure, ma spostiamo l'asset invece sulle performance delle aziende. Quindi posso tenere quelle aziende che sono in buone condizioni. Se faccio una gara e questa gara va deserta, allora io posso tenermi l'azienda, però me la tengo per 2 anni, quindi se ho risultati che, diciamo, tengono conto di quello che io ci ho investito, è un conto, e quindi se si risana è un conto. Se invece non va bene, in 2 anni la devo dismettere o la liquido e quindi vado sul mercato. Però, diciamo, sono riflessioni di massima che però spostano l'asse sulla performance delle aziende, sulla regolazione, sulla possibilità di benchmark tra le diverse aziende italiane e quelle europee, non soltanto sulla regolazione. Sì, io mi sono attenuto alla norma, viene il privato, fa una tariffa alta e i cittadini non penso siano contenti. O mi dà un servizio qualitativamente migliore, ma di molto, oppure, cioè, se Cioè, diciamo, se il ritardo mio era 5 minuti e quello ne fa 3, così alla fine tutto questo sistema lascia il tempo che trovo. E poi, insieme a questo fatto, ci sono altri problemi sempre sulla regolazione, perché per esempio per il servizio idrico e i rifiuti, lo richiamava il professor Becchis, le ATO a fine anno scompaiono, quindi non si sa più chi è il regolatore principe che va a fare l'articolazione tariffaria nel singolo territorio di riferimento. Allora diamo il ruolo fondamentale ai comuni, mettiamo il fatto che i comuni debbano esprimere parere obbligatorio e vincolante in merito alle tariffe, altrimenti il cittadino si lamenterà col sindaco, ma il sindaco non potrà fare niente perché c'è un soggetto sopra di lui che ha deciso una certa cosa. Quindi non si sa chi affida, e questo è demandato alle regioni che devono definire, hanno il compito di definire questa cosa entro fine anno. Non si sa cosa affida. Si parla di servizio idrico integrato, poi alcuni comuni per alcune normative non stanno negli ambiti e quindi diciamo, c'è già una differenziazione. Fanno parte del servizio. Il servizio idrico integrato vuol dire anche captazione, fognatura e depurazione. Poi non si sa in che modo, cioè, allora non c'è una regolamentazione delle politiche di settore generali. Abbiamo visto prima, ci sono dei settori esclusi. Allora, secondo l'ambito in cui mi trovo, applico una determinata normativa e quindi lo regolo in un certo modo. Allora vale ancora la pena parlare di normativa generale dei servizi pubblici locali di rilevanza economica, oppure diciamo quali sono i servizi che stanno lì dentro e seguono quella normativa. Cioè, per l'idrico mi faccio le norme comunitarie, posso farle in house a prescindere dal valore economico. Per le mense scolastiche no, devo avere dei vincoli, devo fare l'analisi di mercato, devo fare altre cose. Cioè, questi sono tutti i limiti e problematiche che noi siamo chiamati ad affrontare, mentre diciamo, il legislatore si limita a mettere la norma, noi poi dobbiamo applicarla, quindi abbiamo problemi operativi stando sul campo. Tutto ciò quindi definisce un'eccessiva frammentazione del settore, quindi dicevo dove mi trovo, devo vedere cosa applico, e rende ancora più evidente che quello che diceva il vice sindaco, quello che diceva il rappresentante della provincia, che noi ci troviamo nella fase di fare regolatori e gestori, ma non perché l'abbiamo voluto, ma perché nel tempo è stato così, e quindi dobbiamo spostare l'asse, e invitiamo il governo, l'abbiamo fatto su tutti i tavoli, a un confronto con noi per seguire quella logica bottom up, quella logica dal basso che dicevamo prima, e andare nel senso prospettato di una regolazione efficiente e chiara e che dia ad ogni ente la propria competenza. Grazie.
Thank you. And Catarina, please. Catarina Rosetta Palma, Istituto Universitario di Lisboa, Portugal. Catarina, 15 minutes is okay for you?
Yes. Sì. Yes, like this. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank the Fondazione Ambiente e Franco Vecchis in particular for inviting me to come here today. I will be telling you a little bit about how the regulation of water, wastewater, and municipal solid waste is done in Portugal. My institution is the University Institute of Lisbon. I'm with the business school, so we have a research unit called the Business Research Unit, and our work is sponsored by the Portuguese Foundation for Science and Technology. So, okay, what? What happened?
I don't know what's happened. Okay. Okay.
So should I use the...
No, I can. I think. Okay, now it's okay.
Okay, so the way I structure this very, very short presentation, this is just a small summary of how the system works, although I have some references at the end. So if anyone is interested, you can go check the references and see the original sources. Some of them are in English. So the way I structured my presentation was, first I'll give you a couple of minutes on how the sector was at the end of the last century, and then how the regulator was set up, and then the results and what's happening now and what the main challenges are for the future. So historically, these services, as in most other countries, I would say, have been provided by municipalities. In Portugal, there was a law in 1936 that stated this, actually, that said the municipality is responsible for this sort of services. We have currently 308 municipalities in Portugal. I put up a map. We now complain that we have too many, although I've realized, talking to some of the other people here, that other countries have many more. Even considering the size of our country, we're not that much smaller than France, and France has a lot more municipalities than we do. So I guess it's not as bad as people in Portugal complain. The largest municipality is Lisbon. Obviously, it's the capital. There's 500,000 inhabitants, and then approximately 1/3 of our municipalities, mostly in the inside of Portugal. So if you look at that map, most of the coast is where the inhabitants are, and then in the inside of the country, there are municipalities with many fewer people. 1/3 of them are under 10,000 inhabitants, so fairly small systems. So even though the municipalities were supposed to provide these services, the truth of the matter is that the quality of the service was pretty low. Coverage was patchy, which means that not everyone got coverage for the services, and this is especially true for wastewater and waste services. So I have some data here for you from the beginning of the 1990s. So in 1993, the water supply services, so drinking water supply services reached 75% of the population, which is, not bad, but not good enough. But then the wastewater drainage and treatment was really, really low. Only 25% of the population had access to decent wastewater systems. And when I say decent, I mean including treatment. So a slightly higher percentage had drainage, which means there was a system to collect the water, but then it was dumped into the rivers with no treatment. So with drainage and treatment, we only had 25% of the population. Finally, for municipal solid waste collection and disposal, the figure was 41% in 1990. So this was really bad. And in fact, I am not that old, and I remember the time when there were open trash, what do you call them, like places where there were dumps. And you could see them. You'd drive around, and there was a dump. And I'm not that old. So in 1990, you remember. I mean, you could see that in the country. The waste services were also fairly bad. Okay, so we had, taking into account the state of the situation, we had a set of important legal changes in 1993, which was applied in 1994, and it included the following points. So the first thing was activities were divided into two types of activity, bulk and retail. And I have a little table there with for the three services, so drinking water supply, wastewater, and municipal waste, solid waste. Bulk, what was legally established to be bulk, and what was considered retail. And this is really important. This distinction is really important because at the same time, the responsibilities for making sure that these services were working were divided differently. So the bulk activities were now the responsibility of the national government, of the state, the Portuguese state. And the retail activities remained the responsibility of the municipalities. Okay, so this was very important in the way the Portuguese system is now organized. So there is this division, what are considered bulk and retail activities. The other important changes that came with this legislation was the possibility of concessions to private enterprises previously there had been no participation of private capital in the sector, and as of 1994 this was now possible. So municipalities or the state could give concessions, even though in practice it was only the municipalities that did some concessions of retail services. But the possibility of private enterprises having concessions was created. And the multi-municipal systems were created between, well, the capital structure is part of each multi-municipal system. Part of the capital comes from the national government, and the rest comes from different municipalities that are in the area of influence of this multi-municipal service. So these multi-municipal services were created for all these bulk activities to try to take advantage of economies of scale, especially for drinking water supply and wastewater management. Economies of scale are an important fact of investment. So if you have a large system, the unit cost of supply is lower. Therefore, it was important that you had larger scale systems instead of having each municipality trying to produce its own service. At the same time, when these multi-municipal systems were created, public companies were created to run the multi-municipal systems, and these are organized mainly in the Águas de Portugal group, although the waste, it's also in the Águas de Portugal group, but it's called the Empresa Geral de Fomento. Okay, so these are the two main players in terms of bulk activities, and they have become the two main players in the sector in Portugal as a whole, as is normal. The other ones are smaller systems, except for Lisbon. Okay, why have I gone? Okay, so how is the regulation done? The first regulation authority was created a couple of years later. So after the law was changed in '94, people realized that it was important to have a regulator to make sure that, you know, especially if you have private concessions, then you have to make sure that these private companies, these are natural monopolies, obviously, so you may have to make sure that these private companies are somehow regulated. And the Water Authority was created in 1997 to do what? Okay, so IRAR means the Regulating Institute for Water and Waste. So that's the what of regulation. They regulate water and waste. How do they regulate? They have three types of regulation. They have structural regulation of the entire sector in the country, which means that they contribute to and monitor the national strategy for each of these parts, so water, wastewater, and waste. And they also contribute to new legislation. And this they have done since 1997 for the whole country, for all the sectors. They also provide operator regulation, but this until 2011, they were limited to only the concessions and the delegations. This means that whenever a municipality was running its own system, the regulator had nothing to do with it. So they couldn't do anything about that. They didn't analyze it. Although they were supposed to regulate the sector as a whole, they didn't actually regulate have individual regulation of municipal systems until 2011. So basically they were regulating 64 operators. This was all the multi-municipal systems, as well as a few systems that had been concessioned to private companies. Operator regulation includes legal and contractual monitoring, economic regulation, quality of service regulation. This is very typical, but the regulator also had a new duty since 2004, which was to control water quality, drinking water quality. So this could have been done by a separate authority, but in Portugal they decided to attribute this competency to the same regulating authority, which at the time, so between 2004 and now, it was a bit strange because the regulator was in charge of the general system, and also was in charge of water quality control in the whole country, every single municipality. But then it would only regulated actually 60 regulators of a total of about 500. Okay, so the way it was divided was a bit odd, and so since 2009 there was new legislation, and nowadays the regulator has, effective 2011, has a responsibility for all operators. It doesn't matter if they're municipalities, if they're small companies, if they're whatever kind of thing they are, if they're public-private partnership, if they're delegations, if they're concessions, whatever. Anything gets regulated by the same authority, which I think is very positive, and so do the regulators. The type of regulation that they did was mostly what is called sunshine regulation. This means they don't have price-setting authority. What they do is they publish a very important report which is the RASARP, you can find it online, which has individual information for every single regulated operator. Of course, this is going to be a bit more difficult next year because they're supposed to be doing that they were doing that for 60 companies, and now they're supposed to do it for almost 500. 421 is the water, drinking water. Then you have the waste and the wastewater. So it's a total of 500 operators. So we'll see what they are able to do next year. So what's the current situation? Okay, so here you have again a map of the country. These are the river basin districts, which is what the official level of statistics now for water. So you have the water supply coverage in 2008 was 94%, already pretty good. You had you can't see these numbers, of course, but everywhere in the country is above 80%. Okay, so even the lowest coverage regions are above 80%. This is wrong. This was one of the bad cases of copy and paste. This is a 71% coverage, actually. Okay, so this is 94% for drinking water supply, 71% for treatment, so drainage and treatment. And here in drainage and treatment, you have some still bad situations. So you have, for example, this area in the north of Portugal, Minho, is below 60% coverage still. Okay, so this is in 2008. As for municipal urban waste, the situation has markedly improved. So since 1995, we have achieved, in around 2002, we achieved a rate of 100% adequate disposal, collection and disposal. Okay, so this is the situation, now. I'm sorry, I keep going back when I want to go forward. Sorry. Okay, so what are the way I see it now, the main challenges in the system as we speak right now? Okay, for the operators, we have a very significant problem with cost recovery levels. So we've been producing the statistics since 2005 because of the Water Framework Directive, and the latest statistics were cost recovery of 80% for drinking water, 46% for wastewater management, and 23% for municipal waste. This figure is older. They're not covered by the Water Framework Directive, unfortunately, so we don't get regular statistics for waste. We get regular statistics for water, but not for waste. We have the statistics are a bit older, this one for waste. Now, this is I just want to remind you that the Water Framework Directive actually says that financial and environmental and resource costs should be covered, and this is just financial costs. Okay, so even ignoring the environmental costs, the cost recovery levels are fairly low, and they have been getting lower, which is very natural because the investment has been growing, so it's only natural that cost recovery levels have been growing lower because the prices haven't been increasing as much as the costs. So this is the financial sustainability challenge, I would say, is one of the main problems that we have for the future. As for human resources, the regulator actually evaluates that the human resources in Portugal in the sector, as we speak, are adequate, with some exceptions, and it's not the most significant issue. Now, having worked with the data, the available national survey for the sector, I have to say that there are also some inconsistencies and some problems with data that is not filled out properly by the operators. And plus the economics data, so the cost and revenue data, is of a lower quality than the physical data. So you ask the operators where their treatment stations are, where the network is, and they know, and they give you the answer. But then you ask them, what are your non-tariff revenues? What are your investment costs? And they don't fill in the information. So we have some problems. Although you can, this is official data. This cost recovery levels, they're done with considering data from all the operators in the country. But still, many operators do not reply, and some of them who do reply, they have some inconsistencies. Finally, another challenge is that the final price, this has not changed in the legislation. The final price is still set by the municipalities. So the final prices for all these services are political prices. So the mayor decides how the price is going to be set. Sometimes it does it with a good technical background. Sometimes he does it with no technical background at all. So you have crazy tariff structures that have 30 blocks and consider all types of variables that have nothing to do with water consumption. And we still have that. And this is still a challenge. So the regulator can't force operators to change their tariff structure. What they can do and have done is to provide recommendations, and it turns out that recommendations are actually pretty effective. You see that in the past couple of years, the regulator has provided recommendations, and the municipalities have changed some of the tariff structures, although they're not obliged to do so. They have changed some of their tariff structures to comply with the recommendations of the regulator. Sorry. This is just to give you an idea. These are the multi-municipal in the water sector, drinking water supply. These are the and also wastewater. These are the multi-municipal systems. So the little these are the municipalities here, and then you can see where the multi-municipal systems are. And the colors. This figure I took from a presentation of Águas de Portugal. The colors mean basically if you're red, it means you have no money at all. This says that your equity is negative. These are companies at this moment have negative equity. Okay, so these are in red, and then you have a system which is losing more than 50% of their original equity, and then you have the green ones are the ones where everything is okay, and the yellow ones are not so okay. So this is just so you can see that other than the distribution, which is still with the municipalities mostly, which has some financial sustainability problems, you also have financial sustainability problems at the multi-municipal level, especially, and this is of course not a surprise, in the areas where there's less population, because in the coast there's more people, so it's easier to get your systems financed. You can't charge incredibly high prices in the interior of Portugal because populations are poorer and there's very few people. So it's more expensive to run, and then there's less revenue capacity. So the financial sustainability issue is really a key issue at this moment in Portugal. So in terms of the regulator, what do I see as the main challenges? Well, in terms of human resources, the staff in the regulator is much more highly qualified than in your average operator. 80% of the staff holds a degree, and from my personal experience, they're fairly competent, very technically competent people. But you should remember that in 2011, we extended the responsibility from 60 to 500 operators, and they did not get additional staff. So they asked for additional staff, and I actually translated here something that I found in their official budget request to the ministry in 2010, which is on their website. They're very transparent. This regulator is very good, and they're very transparent. And this is what they themselves say. With the currently available resources, ERSAD, which is the name of the regulator right now, is unable to comply with all its obligations under the law, with serious damages for the functioning of the sector. So this is a key issue. The regulator really has increased responsibilities. They really need additional resources, and they haven't so far received them, and under the current Portuguese budget situation, it's hard to see how they will. So this is a challenge. A second challenge that I find important to refer, and this is my last point, is that the information and the technical support provided by the regulator is crucial for the good functioning of the system, for the operators. Because, as I said before, the recommendations appear to yield results even when they're non-binding. So if the regulator says you shouldn't have 20 blocks, you should have only 4, you can see the municipalities slowly changing their tariff structures to comply with the 4 blocks, for example. Also, the fact that the regulator is now has responsibility for all the operators implies that we will have an application of similar methodologies for all types of operators, whether you're a partnership or a public company or whatever. Now you will have to fill out these cost sheets and revenue sheets exactly in the same way everywhere. And I think that's also really important. There are some issues still with the data, because the data, there's a national survey which is official, but the national statistics are official. They're with the Water Authority, and nobody trusts the data. And so the ERSAD is doing their alternative data collection, which I think is terrible. I think there should be a significant effort in trying to get the official statistics to comply, to be the same as the ones that the regulator is going to comply. So I hope that's the direction we're going to be going. Thank you.
Thank you, Katerina. I hope that this very short presentation can become a full lecture in the next edition of the summer school. As I think that it deserves, absolutely. So consider the invitation already sent. Okay. Jihad?
Yes.
About France.
We're gonna talk about France effectively in the water sector. And yesterday I gave the lecture, so you have enough information about the water and sanitation sector in France. So since we have, I have only 15 minutes, maybe, here it comes.
Restart.
Yes.
But it's quite heavy for him.
I'm sorry.
I just.
We have to reload it. Where is it? Here
Yeah.
it is. Okay, let's keep it that
No,
way.
no, no, no.
No,
Just-
that's fine.
No, it actually
That's fine.
works.
Should work now. Just a few seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Here it is. So, since I have only about 10-15 minutes, maybe I can skip the first part, the French water sector. So it is well known, and I gave the lecture yesterday about that, to focus the analysis on the delegation process in France. And you all know, mainly worldwide, we have two models. What we call the UK model. We have a full privatized water sector, and we have the delegation process in France, and we try to duplicate this model worldwide in Latin America and in Asia and so on. And then the second point, it is about regulation without regulator. It exists, by the way, and you will see that we don't have a national authority to regulate these services in France. We based the regulation on the contract between two parties. So we have a lot of work to do on the definition of the contract or delegation contract. So let me get directly to the delegation of water and sanitation services in France. State and local services have been delegated in France at least since 1270. I'm not talking here about water services. I'm talking about public services. So we found in our documentation the first delegation process goes back to 1270. In the last 60 years, if we talk about water and sanitation services in France, in the last 60 years, the French local municipalities have faced many problems. Poor performance, inefficiency, low productivity in managing their services, and especially after the Second World War II. So, over in the 80s, I'm sorry, especially after the 1982 Act and the 1992 Water Act, the French municipalities tried to delegate these services because they faced a lot of problems, technical problems, financial problems, and we have today about over 80%, slightly over 80% of the water sector delegated to private companies. I may bring your attention on one important point, that private participation in the water sector does not relieve the public authorities of their responsibility to ensure safe and efficient water services and sanitation and services. And they have to play their role to fight against any monopoly position in the water sector. So they are kind of a local regulator. What was and is today the primary goals of the French local municipalities? Of course, today France, it's covered 99% about water services. About sanitation, it's slightly less than that, because some players have the right to put inside treatment plants for their wastewater services. To expand, of course, sewage treatment, respect EU and national standards of effluent discharges, and we, the French local municipalities, wanted to provide better quality of the service, especially about maintenance, rehabilitation, and to fight against leaks in the systems, to finance the system with or without any public subsidies, and finally, to get a higher operation efficiency in this sector. So, delegation, we instituted this long time ago. In the water sector, I think the first case of delegation, it goes back to 1775 or 76, well-documented case of delegation in the water sector. This is the Parisian case, well-known Parisian case with the Perrier brothers. Delegation differ according to, first of all, the degree of the firm involvement in this service, and I will present a table later on to show you the degree of involvement and the risk that the external operator bears. It covers mainly four contractual forms. We have concession. Concession, it is today very, I may say epsilon, so it doesn't exist really in the water sector, maybe in wastewater treatment plants sometimes, but in water services it is very few. Mainly in the delegation contract we're gonna find lease contract or affirmage. It is over 85% in France today. The last two forms of delegation are very few in the water sector. The contract specifies the nature of expected services, and of course, an important element in the delegation, the pricing issues. So the contract includes price revision and indexation formula. So you have the initial price, and then you have what we call the indexation formula that is based on a basket of some inputs related to the activity. So here the table, delegation contracts, you have concession, affirmage, gérance, and régie intéressée. Following different entries, investment, operation costs, ownership. The most important case is the affirmage. So you have investment, they are public, but since the 90s, some local authorities asked or are asking the private operator to take in charge part of the investment related to maintaining the system, to rehabilitating the system, and so on. Operating costs are 100% private. The ownership, in any case, still public. The management is private in the affirmage. The relationship with users and the risk, of course, in the affirmage case are moderate. Of course, the high risk is bearing when we have concession by the private operator, and the rate setting is the result of a negotiation between the two parties. Of course, payment are rate payers.
What is exactly affirmage?
It's the lease contract. Lease contract, yes. Because you are renting, I mean, the network to the private operator to provide the service. Now, regulation without regulator. So, I'm giving you some the main elements concerning the legal regulation status in France. The French legislation has introduced a number of changes starting in the 90s. We have the 1992 Act, the 1993 Act, 95, and so on and so on. Delegation contracts were frequently renewed without any tendering till 1992, 1993. And then to fight against the corruption in France, especially, we have a tight relationship between politics and delegation of water and environmental services. The Sapin law were adopted, and we institute a kind of tendering in the water sector. This was confirmed by two laws in 1995 and what we call the Barnier Law, who added one more thing in the water sector, limiting the maximum duration of delegation contracts up to 20 years if concession, and we have 10 to 12 years, it depends in cases for affirmage or lease contracts. And in the 1995 law, we added some, let's call it a reporting constraint on the operator to have a more and a clear idea about this service, the prices, and the quality of the service itself. So, yes. Delegation, we have the legal status. So you have the tendering process, and I have to add one important thing, and this is a specificity related to the French case. Once you launch the auctioning process, at one time before awarding the service, the local authority has the right to negotiate directly with the retained operators. I mean by that, this is what we call the free choice principle applied in the water sector. So, by the communal code, local authorities can negotiate directly with some operator or some operators to negotiate the service, the quality, or investment sometimes if we have, for example, the lease contracts. Controlling the water sector, we have different bodies, we have different actors. So we have the préfet, what we call, the préfet is the territorial administrator of the state. He controls the legally of public procurements and the compliance with technical standards, and the local authority or the organizer will control, monitor the prices, control the firm operating in the market, the competition, and of course ensure that water and sanitation services are well executed, and so on and so on. Now, so as you can see, we have the contract. We don't have a national regulatory agency. We have the contract, and everything is based on the contract. Of course, we have the legal framework well established. Now we have to talk and we have to ameliorate, improve the contract between these two parties. That's why there is no best nor optimal regulation model. This is the case of France. Economic regulation is based on the contract, and we have today some problems to overcome. Asymmetric information, the lack of real competition. Mainly we have mainly three private companies, Lyonnaise des Eaux, Générale des Eaux, with different names, and the SOR. Incomplete contract, and of course we have to introduce incentive mechanism in the definition of these contracts. This can be worked. I mean, we can overcome these problems if we work together, economists, managers, of course, engineers, lawyers, and so on. And I think when you launch the idea of local public service regulation, this school, I think it has its place in the field. Thank you.
Thank you, Jihad. Thank you very much, Jihad, and also for the comparative table, pretty interesting. This the one on water sector in France. Malika Chartouk, Université de Tizi Ouzou, Algérie.
That's easy.
Good afternoon. I want to thank Professor Franco Beckis and Fondazione per l'Ambiente for the invitation. I want to say that I don't speak very well English, but I try to give you idea about the work of my laboratory, Réforme économique et dynamique locale. speaking about evaluation of public research, évaluation des politiques publiques. Topics and items because of difficulties of knowing the Algerian situation. I speak about administrative and territorial organization, example of delegation powers to the municipalities in Algeria, improvement and the improvement in the management of public services, the regulation in the last years. And I think I speak about also the financing of local public services in Algeria, and I try to finally give the preoccupation of le problème de la tarification. Concept of public services, concept involving and based of the colonial legacy before, because it's considered like common goods, and the management of these resources are done by community, and there is a lot of knowledge in the community for managing these resources. That's why I think, like Franco Becchis, that there is a lot of research and knowledge about this mean of managing the resources, the natural resources, especially for water. In North Africa, but also in Algeria. And there is a new concept and new practice in these countries, especially in Algeria. Especially from the globalization and the adoption of the Washington process. There is a role of public action in these countries, in North Africa, but especially in Algeria, because of external pleasure, but also because of internal constraints, lack of funds, inefficiency of poor quality of public services. And this is a required transition for fully public management to a partial or a complete privatization in public-private partnership, concession, delegation, or affermage, like we said. Now about this is as introduction. Now in the administration and territoriality organization, there is a lot of centralization because of history and legacy of French system of legacy. The state is, as you see, very centralized. We have as province, wilaya, it's province like this, and more than 1,500 municipalities. And there is administrative districts, which is by the concentration, and there is no region. Fortunately, there is no regional system, regional organization. Even there is a possibility of group municipality, donc what we say in France, les intercommunalités. Decentralization, something which it is put in the constitution because the state promotes decentralization, but in practice these concepts remain unclear, and the state shows significant delays in the implementation of decentralization and prefer devolution or deconcentration. And the local governments remain dependent on central government as the legal and financial and tax, especially because of resources of hydrocarbon. That's why all taxes, all resources, financial resources, is coming from the central state. There is, I see, a strong tradition of centralization, and even there is a beginning of reforms, but decentralization is also strongly driven by international institutions and bilateral and multilateral cooperation, but in the reality there is main obstacle to better management local service local public services in the kind of decentralization. There was a lot of limitation for the activity of local authorities, structural problem related to good governance, the multiplicity of central and territorial structure. There is a need to define and clarify the responsibility of the various development actors. In the financial resources, there is weakness, as I say it, of local authorities' owns. And in terms of human resources, total staff of civil servants and a large but low ratio and the quality of skilled manager and technician of the management of public services. There is also, we want to notice the absence of effective law and regulation. Even in the situation of water, as we see it, there is law and a process which is put in. At the level of expertise in environmental protection, local authorities are facing difficulties in the implementation of their duty. For the example of delegated power to the municipality in Algeria, in terms of local public services and community facility, the municipal council decided on the creation of management and municipal public services in the area of clean water, distribution and clean water, sewerage, collection, transport, landfill, and public waste treatment and waste treated. The achievement of participation in the implementation of facilities and hydraulic structure for storm water control and protection against flooding, and the achievement of participation in the implementation of the development of beaches, and so on in the perimeter communal. Development of public policy strategy in most sectors, water, sanitation, transport, energy, and waste, and creation of national public dememberment with local management to improve local public services, especially in water and sanitation. Partial delegation of water management and sanitation in the 4 major cities, Algiers, Oran, Constantine, and Annaba. About 5 billion people affected. Grant from the a million, I think, excuse me, a million, yes, excuse me, grant from the collection, sorting of and transport of waste in many cities and towns of the country in favor of private operator and privatization of transport in cities, about 15 cities. We work also about this in our research in the laboratory. This management method now in improvement in the management of public services in terms of regulation. With this complex, we see a complex and fractional organization in the management of public service, waste and sanitation in Algeria. Like we see, there is this complexity and this fractioned organization is mentioned about this organization. There is the state, behind the state, the advisory council and the interior, Ministère de l'Intérieur et des collectivités locales, le ministère intérieur, and the Minister of Water Resources and Minister Territorially, Management, Planning Territorial, and Minister of Health and Population. This is the authorities which can't concentrate the decision, and there is local authorities and direction central direction of ministry, also in the wilaya province. There is when in water and sanitation, Agency National of Hydric Resources, and Agence des Barrages, Agency of Barrage. Excusez-moi. Yes, je vais prendre au moins un mot. Alors, and there is the Authority of Regulation, and which is under the Ministry of Resources, water resources, and this is the two enterprises, ADE, Algérienne des Eaux, and ONA, Office National de l'Assainissement, which is two enterprises which is work in this area. And in the example I give it in the far, there is the four SPA, Société par Action, which is specialized in four great town of Algeria and the user, and also the démembrements régionaux et locaux of ADE and ONA, of these two enterprises. Je vais finir. There is in 2005 the enactment of the law of water, and a lot of preoccupation, like it's done in another in the world, is done also in Algeria, but as in the other sector, for energy or for telecommunication, there is not saisine. It means that there is no intervention of this agency. Il n'y a pas de saisine donc de ces agences de régulation. There is in the process of involvement of cette amélioration, donc there is a process of delegation which transfers the management of the water and the wastewater in this four town, which is concerned transfer of knowledge and the transfer of management of water and la mise à niveau donc des réseaux urbains by these companies, Suez Environnement, Agbar, Eau-de-Marseille, etc. But there is no which are donc with the joint venture which I named it here, and there is not really a transfer about the two enterprises which are permanent in this area. I want to see about this experience of delegation partielle of public services about from enterprises. I want to speak only a little about the financial project in Algeria. The contribution of an international financial institution is limited. These financial institutions are able to print their view in how to manage this fund, and encourages and requires the management mode of the service concerned. But the state that provides funding for ambitious program of infrastructure and widespread access to basic services. For instance, I give about barrage there is 69 program of building barrage. There is, as part of the 5-year plan, there is a $15 billion to develop and upgrading of public service of water and sanitation in the process, this process of regulation. The operation of reflection for the implementation of the process of partial delegation of the management of public water and sanitation in cities like Algiers was founded by World Bank. User pay taxes using form of participation in financing public services of water and sanitation. And I want to finish by the pricing of public local services such as water and sanitation. Especially in Algeria. For students, I speak about the other region of North Africa. And speak about the social cost and the data, les données qui ont trait à cela. Alors, I finish with this example of price of basic utilities of water and sanitation in Algeria. For instance, I give some examples of basic rates in drinking water. I choose 3 towns in the north and one in the high plains and another in the south. And you know the distinction, the difference between all these. When we say that 10 dinars, it's equal €1. €1, 100 dinar, it's €1. As example of prices of basic sanitation, the same for sanitation, and now I give you for understanding the central financing and of drinking water and sanitation. For this structure of a water bill of a household has consumed 30 meter cube in a charging zone. We say for drinking water and for sanitation, we have this. There is a unit, and this is the result. And I finish with the structure of water bill of a household that has consumed in all the zone. But I think that for conclusion, yes, we can see it tomorrow with the student for details. But now I want to see that there is an effort to renew the organization of the regulation, but really concurrency, désintégration horizontale et verticale, all these problems don't excuse me, I can't traduce this, but the idea is these things don't really, especially there is a law about concurrency, about corruption, all about the themes of regulation, but in the reality there is difficulties to arrive to this. The same for the privatization, which is partially privatization. And now, and I finish about these ideas, I want to give some perspective, but I think it's not about the state is in condition to do the things because an international situation and process which is potent, but in the reality there is not very adapted about local situation, and especially in local situation. Now the perspective is to act for the tarification, to act to diversify financial system of financial, and also in the governance to act to participate to governance, to une gestion participative, et fondamentalement also to do that authority regulation, que ces autorités jouent leur rôle, that authority of regulation which are putted, they play the role, because the law is, there is a very good law about this water law, but the prerogative, the attribution, are not effectively accomplished in the territory. Voilà. Thank you.
Thank you, Malika, and then Peter North from the UK about national regulation system.
Thanks very much. I don't have any presentation, so I'll sit down and talk directly. And I'll focus on electricity regulation in the UK. So the regulator is set at national level. The name of the organisation is Ofgem. That's the Office of Gas and Electricity Markets. And I guess the clue's in the title there, that it's markets, so we regard ourselves as having a sort of fully competitive electricity market. So if I talk a little bit about the background of electricity production and supply in the UK, you'll sort of understand where we come from and where we are now. So I guess at the end of the sort of 18th, 19th century, all the way through to I guess early 20th century, small electricity companies set up in towns and generated and supplied electricity. Some of them were municipal undertakings, some of them were private organisations, and there was a whole range of different voltages and different quality of electricity supply. So about mid-20th century, government was obviously concerned about the national competitiveness of having this non-standardised arrangements, and then took the electricity generation and supply business into public ownership. It then focused on building the largest possible power stations it could, based on the huge coal reserves that the UK had at the time. And you see sort of during the 50s the construction of 2,000 megawatt power stations based on coal seams and located near very large rivers to provide the cooling requirements for the power stations. And in conjunction with that, there was a whole network of electricity transmission systems built, overhead lines to supply the bulk power up and down the country. to town cities and to local electricity distribution networks. So that was all fine and well, but as we get into the 60s and 70s, there was a very cosy relationship between the generators and the coal industry. It was supplied predominantly from UK coal mines. There was a number of nuclear electric stations built at the time, and there wasn't any cost transparency, any competition, and industry complained that they're paying too much for electricity compared with international counterparts, and it affected our national competitiveness. In the late 70s, early 80s, along came Margaret Thatcher with the Conservative government with a view of bringing private sector practice to improve the efficiency of the whole range of nationalised industries. So out that period then, the electricity supply industry was broken up and privatised. It was divided into generation markets, national transmission market, local distribution network operators, and electricity suppliers. Now each of those areas had to apply for licenses. It had to comply with the licence condition to ensure that it provided the right level of reliability, quality of electrical supply, the right sort of protection for customers, etc. And if they were in breach or of those licence conditions, or they received too many complaints from consumers, the regulator had the power to remove the licence, and they would cease business. So during the 90s, as the privatisation took place, we saw a proliferation of gas-fired power stations being constructed based on private finance. And that came about because of the reserves of gas that the UK had in the North Sea at the time. Gas is very easily transported, very easily burnt in gas turbines, which compared with coal-fired power stations are cheap to build and clean burning. So the very early power projects, independent power projects as they were called, IPPs, were privately financed, but relied on a whole suite of contracts being put in place for gas purchasing over, say, the contract period, say 15 years, electricity offtake contracts with electricity suppliers, performance contracts with the turnkey construction of the power plants themselves. So we saw this proliferation of new combined cycle gas turbine power stations being built, and this left the UK with a combination of gas-fired nuclear power stations and a certain amount of coal-fired power stations. The transmission of that electricity up and down the country is carried out by the Transco, National Transmission Company, also operating a licence. And like the local distribution network operator, it's a monopoly business, so we're not going to have competing wires. We only want one set of wires, but these, because it's a monopoly business, it's very heavily regulated. So once again, the National Transmission Company has the responsibility of ensuring that there's enough generation capacity on the system to meet peak demands. So it has to contract with generators to ensure there's enough spinning reserve to ensure that they can meet peak demands and we don't get blackouts. It has to maintain the quality of electricity supply, the voltage and the frequencies, so they keep the system in balance. Then we get down to the local distribution networks, and this is at lower voltage, and this takes supplies from the transmission network into people's homes and to businesses at the lower voltages. Once again, they are regulated. It's a monopoly business. They can only charge an agreed amount for use of system charge, as agreed with the regulator, and this is done over 5-year periods, where they make their case for investment in the next period, and the case for what they need to be able to charge to recover investment in the system. That's the basic arrangements there. And separate to that, we have electricity supply companies, and they purchase electricity from the generators. They pay use of system to both the transmission network operator and the local distribution network, and they supply consumers with the electricity. That is a very competitive market. There are a whole range of electricity suppliers available, and customers in the UK tend to switch. Well, there's two types of customers: those that switch as often as they can to get the best electricity deal, and they're called churners because they keep churning through different contracts. And then there's the other type of consumer that doesn't really care and just occasionally decides to switch electricity consumers. And interestingly, the internet is very helpful. There are websites that help you actually choose who is the most competitive supplier, and they, at a press of a button, will do all the necessary changes for you. So it's quite easy to actually switch suppliers. So that's where the market sits at this moment in time. As I discussed this morning, there is no regulation on heat. This is just an emerging interest now. The government is sort of minded not to get too involved with the regulation of heat. Its main interest is in around protection of consumers and the promotion of competition. Industry doesn't want regulation, clearly, because it wants to be free to look for innovative supply solutions. And government doesn't really want to intervene more than absolutely necessary, but it's just got to make sure that the risk and revenue issues are in balance. Otherwise, if quality of service or price of heat gets out of hand, then they would consider bringing in regulation. So there's a number of other issues around the heat side, really, and that's around that customers might enter into long-term heat supply contracts with suppliers. How are they protected over the long term? There's issues and questions around the engineering standards and the output standards from heat systems. And these are all the sort of issues that we encountered on the electricity supply system almost a century before, and that was sort of resolved through taking into public ownership the systems. So I guess there is, if the regulator isn't strong enough, then I suppose there is a good argument for public sector involvement to help develop and initiate this new industry, a new utility within the UK. But some of the concerns around too much regulation is that it might discourage investment, because people think that investors might see their returns from investments hampered. And also there are sort of questions about competition. If you connect solely to networks, does that mean consumers, can they switch to gas, switch to electricity, or are they prevented from doing that? So there's a whole range of questions that we're undecided on in heat regulation. So what are the challenges really to this market system? Clearly, private sector is only going to invest in what it has to make its return. It's going to do no more than that. But there are demands that come from Europe and environmental issues about improving the environmental performance of electricity supply. As we discussed again this morning, reducing carbon emissions are extremely important. The regulator, as I said, tends to tinker around with the market at the periphery, but doesn't get in and make strong rules on what has to and has not to be done. So it tends to provide market incentives in order to achieve the outcomes it requires. So one of the big initiatives that's been done in the past is the UK meeting its obligation to generate a certain percentage of its electricity from renewable sources. There, Ofgem introduced the Renewable Obligations Certificate, which placed an obligation on electricity suppliers to supply a percentage of their electricity generation from renewable sources. if it didn't meet that obligation, they got fined, and they got fined an awful lot of money. So that made effectively money available in the system for developers, power stations or whatever, to invest in renewable electricity generating plant. And that to a certain degree has been reasonably successful. There's also been certain tax incentives around investment, and also there's been carbon tax applied to the supply of fossil fuel-based electricity, and this is called the climate change levy. And to encourage low-carbon energy sources, such as combined heat and power, there's an exemption arrangement whereby good quality combined heat and power, it's the system that generates highly efficient heat and electricity output, is actually made exempt from that. So these are all small, minor instruments. Going forward, the UK government are now on a path to reduce the UK's CO2 emissions to by 80% of 1990 levels. And this is going to require a significant investment in both renewables and nuclear generating capacity. But once again, the issue is how do they bring the market to invest in, or substantially in nuclear investment, when there's no long-term certainty around pricing and electricity markets. So the current thinking in government is to introduce a feed-in tariff for low and zero carbon technology, nuclear being one of them. One of the features of the feed-in tariff that they're considering will be a contract for differences. So what the government aim to establish is what they call a strike price for low carbon electricity. Whereby if the market is buying electricity at a higher price, then the feed-in tariff involves the electricity generator supplying government, paying government money. And if the electricity market goes underneath the strike price, and then the government will pay the generator for the low or zero carbon electricity. This money will actually be paid for by the consumer. There's been a lot of argument and discussion that this is going to be expensive, and the consumer is going to pay a lot of money to support this feed-in tariff for low and zero carbon technology. However, on the counter argument that's put forward is that with all the energy efficiency initiatives that the government's promoting, that energy consumption, electricity consumption should reduce significantly. Therefore, the absolute amount of money paid by consumers should not be too onerous. So I think that gives you a little bit of a flavour of how UK market is regulated or not. That it's very much market driven. And that the regulator's role is really to keep the market in check through both applying and controlling the participants' licenses, and also by providing incentives and initiatives to drive the electricity generation market in the direction the government wishes it to do to meet policy requirements.
Much to all speakers and participants, and see you tomorrow.